My fellow Belizeans, later this week, Belize will launch an offer to buy back and cancel the so-called Superbonds. These public debts, which have been on our books since 2007, have now climbed to some $572 million or over $1 billion Belize dollars. An additional $57 million of these bonds will be reinstated on October 19th of this year if a settlement is not concluded by then. After many months of grueling negotiations between government's team and a committee representing major holders of these bonds, an agreement in principle has been reached. With the consent of the Cabinet and the support of holders of 50% of the principal amount of these bonds, this agreement calls for the bondholders to sell their claim at a very significant discount to Belize. Specifically, this deal calls for a 48.3% discount to the face value of the Superbond, together with, for those holders that tender during the offer period, a payment in lieu of accrued interest on the bonds. The government proposes to raise the money for the discounted repurchase through a loan from an affiliate of the Nature Conservancy. In connection with that loan, government will accelerate its marine conservation policies in a manner that will dramatically enhance the preservation of Belize's precious seas, coral reefs, and fish stocks. But let me be clear, in principle, the agreement government has hammered out with the bondholder committee does not guarantee that our proposal will ultimately succeed. While the committee represents close to 50% of bondholders, the offer will require 75% support in order to close. Government has taken the decision that this transaction must eliminate the entirety of the Superbond, not just part of it. And under the terms of the bonds, this requires the support of 75% of the bondholders. In addition, government must now finalize the terms and conditions for the innovative financing being arranged by the Nature Conservancy and button up some outstanding features of the conservation partnership. And so, I emphasize that while we have completed a critical first phase of this process, ultimate success requires additional bondholder support, as well as an agreement on certain conditions attendant to the TNC financing and the conservation objectives. If our proposals are consummated, however, Belize's public debt will be instantly reduced by almost 500 million Belize dollars. To put this in perspective, 12 cents of every dollar of the public debt will be eliminated. This arrangement will also direct, on average, 8 million Belize dollars annually to marine conservation projects and upgrading the protection and management of our marine patrimony. These conservation investments will create new jobs, buttress the tourism industry, fortify the fisheries sector, and catalyze a flood of NGO interest in and financing for marine conservation in Belize. And our proposals address genuine long-term sustainability by way of both policy revisions and financing flows. Government proposes to capitalize a marine conservation endowment whose investment earnings over the next 20 years will grow to 184 million Belize dollars. This endowment has been designed to ensure conservation project funding in perpetuity. Fellow Belizeans, the proposals we advance will usher in a new era of cooperation between our Ministries of the Blue Economy and Sustainable Development on the one hand, and on the other, the NGO conservation fraternity, the fisher folk, the coastal communities, and indeed, the entire collective of marine stakeholders. Government's major eco-marine conservation undertakings will include the expansion of biodiversity zones and the design and implementation of a marine spatial plan. It will also include revisions to the Integrated Coastal Zone Management Framework, additional safeguards to the Belize Barrier Reef Reserve System, and refinements to the management of blue carbon and critical watersheds. The aquaculture sector, as well as changes to the environmental impact assessment process, will also be included. All told, in addition to the almost $500 million Belize dollars of debt reduction, government will make conservation investments that will total some $172 million Belize dollars over the next 20 years, and an endowment of $47 Belize million dollars, which should swell to $184 million Belize dollars by 2041. In the short term, under the existing terms of the Superbond, Belize would have been required to pay some $245 million in interest alone during the 5-year term of our administration. With our proposals, government will pay $115 million Belize dollars in interest, thus generating cash flow savings of some $130 million Belize dollars. Despite having been restructured 3 separate times over the last 14 years, on its current terms, the Superbond calls for payment aggregating more than $1.8 billion Belize dollars over its remaining life, including that principal reinstatement. Even after netting out the anticipated cost of the funding requirement for this operation, we expect that cancelling the Superbond will save for the Belizean taxpayer more than $530 million Belize dollars in gross debt repayments. My administration promised you debt reduction and debt relief. This proposal delivers both in spades, and it addresses, with an exceptional level of innovation, overarching policy and financing needs for Belize's coastline, seas, and barrier reef. Retiring the Superbond, of course, does not solve all our public debt problems. There are further steps to be taken with regard to both bilateral debts and domestic debt. My administration will address these priorities in the coming months and eventually, as I promised, bring the public debt back to sustainable levels. Belize was forced to seek yet another restructuring of the Superbond as a result of the terrible devastation to the Belizean economy wrought by the COVID-19 pandemic. We did not do it lightly. We did not do it willingly. Our ability to make a cash offer for the bond is entirely attributable to TNC's offer of new financing. But we have stretched the limits of that new financing as far as our projected resources will allow. If this proposal fails for lack of bondholder support, a precious opportunity will have been squandered. That opportunity will not knock a second time. I therefore encourage the Bondholder Committee, the Nature Conservancy and its partners, and all others involved in the arrangements to do everything possible to conclude these agreements as soon as possible. For our part, government commits to putting Belize's full effort behind this objective. Together, we will get it done. Thank you, and may God bless Belize.